If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is Bruce McGuire. You are listening to the Maura Murray series. This is part 50. Was Maura really the driver? So this is a topic that gets swept under the rug a lot by the coincidence theorist, narrative steers. They want everybody to believe that it was definitely Maura Murray at the so-called accident scene that definitely wasn't staged under any circumstances, despite the findings of original investigators. So, yeah, it's all quite interesting, but if Maura Murray really wasn't the driver, and if Maura Murray never even left UMass, that does call into question a lot of this house of cards, just assumptions piled on top of assumptions, while narrative steerers pretend all these assumptions are facts and attack and criticize anybody who doesn't drink the Kool-Aid. So the last podcast I did was more than a month ago, actually. April 15th was part 49, Bill Rausch 5. And again, I wasn't even expecting it to make it to 50 episodes because this case should have definitely been solved already. It really should have been solved. And some theorize the reason it hasn't is because of some upper agency involvement or something that has nothing to do with Maura Murray. Are the narrative steers that have infiltrated the online community, is that in part due to this upper agency interference? And is it for the cause of good or not? Because we don't have any of this information. On Mindshock, we don't pretend assumptions are facts and facts are assumptions. On Mindshock, logic and reason are utilized to discern what we can from available information, which is actually very little in this case, and that's what sets the Maura Murray case apart from other cases. So I will be examining this topic in comprehensive fashion, again, looking at reports and interviews to see if we can trace whether or not anyone said they actually saw Maura and why a lot of people just take it on blind faith as gospel truth that Maura Murray was the one at the accident scene. It's really bizarre. You don't see this level of religious, faith-based thinking in other missing persons cases. It's very, very strange and perplexing. As always, if you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If you like this episode, hit the like button. Share it across social media platforms. Keep the awareness up in the case, which is, of course, how cold cases get solved. You can check us out on social media, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic or co-podcaster requests. Questions, comments, thoughts, theories, rebuttals, leave them in the comment section. If you are an individual who doesn't understand basic logic and are not on a first grade English comprehension level, your comment or post might not get approved because it's the obfuscation of narrative steers, whether intentional or otherwise. It's just not efficient to have to educate someone on why an assumption is not a fact, what a fact is, the definitions. I mean, it's just, the purpose here is to bring awareness to a cold case, not educate people who think they're at a certain competency level when they're not, despite their willingness to discuss this case online. Some people have nothing better to do. They just really want to be involved. But if they're not at a certain level, maybe get a tutor or just learn a little bit more so that way we can keep all conversation efficient. Because pretending assumptions are facts and building these gigantic stacks on assumptions and fallacies, pretending those are facts and then attempting to theorize off of them while shutting down other avenues of investigation that are actually logical and scientific and interested in the real truth, that's just not efficient. It's not conducive to any kind of real discussion of any kind or pushing the case forward. If anything, that's just obfuscating and taking away from real discussion taking place. And the Maura Murray community, just like the Stephen Avery making a murder community, these communities have obviously been infiltrated by certain parties with the intention of narrative steering and obfuscating away from real, truthful, scientific-based discussions. This is obviously just easy to see for anybody who's been following these cases online. All right, so let's jump right into it. There are many personalities, both online and in the media, that just continue to propagate as gospel truth that Maura Murray was indeed the driver just beyond the weathered barn corner at the supposed accident scene. Of course, people just really don't want to look at all the evidence, the witnesses who overheard the earlier accident closer to 7 p.m. This was on scanners. There were multiple witnesses. If you haven't checked out the podcast, An Earlier Accident, check that one out. I go over all of these things. So this is not open and shut as to whether or not this was even a real accident. We really don't know. Anyone pretending to know that wasn't there, they're just pretending. They're pretending their assumptions are facts. So again, let me try to preclude some of the obfuscation that no doubt will ensue following this podcast. Let's go over the definition of an assumption. So all of you with Dunning-Kruger so severe out there that want to question my assessment on what an assumption or fact is, let's do it. Crack open your dictionary. An assumption is a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen or have had happened without proof. Now, this is going to open up another can of worms because do people know what proof is? Judging from some of the conversation around the Maura Murray case, a lot of people don't. So let's crack that dictionary again. Proof. Evidence establishing a fact or the truth of a statement. Okay? Easy enough, right? I mean, we're not talking anything advanced here. I mean, some of the trolls out there that are pretending that I'm pretending to be some kind of college professor, although they have no way of knowing whether I am or not, or how many, if any, advanced degrees I have, which I'm not going to get into any of these appeals to authority logic fallacies, because either what I'm saying has merit or it doesn't. The background doesn't matter. But rest assured, I've been through the gauntlet as far as the educational institutions are concerned, but again, that's irrelevant because these definitions can be empirically verified by anyone with a dictionary. It's really not that difficult. So now that we got what an assumption and proof, we got that out of the way. Is there any proof that Maura Murray was the driver at the scene of the alleged accident in New Hampshire? In North Haverhille. Now, so far, no one has provided any. A lot of people online just take it on blind faith as gospel truth. They take this assumption on blind faith as gospel truth. Really, the only evidence that's presented is Butch Atwood's testimony, which, let's assume Butch Atwood would never lie, be intimidated, or is some kind of infallible God that can never be mistaken. Let's assume that to be true. Are the words of humans actual proof? Because if I say I did something or saw someone, even if I believe I'm telling the truth, for whatever reason, like let's say I'm not intentionally lying, which of course Butch Atwood did fail a lie detector test. So again, that doesn't mean anything. If he had some kind of heart condition, he was nervous, whatever, take that as you will. But again, proof is evidence establishing a fact or the truth of a statement. So does that establish, perhaps some of these people don't know what establish means. Let's look at the definition of establish. To set up on a firm or permanent basis or achieve permanent acceptance. Okay? So do the words of humans establish something as a fact? Are there people out there that allege that when a human says something, even if they're not lying, I mean, that's irrelevant whether they're trying to deceive or whatever, whether they are or they aren't, are the words of humans irrefutable evidence that establish something as truth or fact? Is there anybody out there that actually thinks that? I mean, yes, witness testimony is witness testimony. Now, again, that is not scientific fact. That is not irrefutable evidence, especially at night in the dark, possibly wearing her hair a different way. Because Butch Atwood said it didn't look like the pictures he was shown of Maura. Does that mean it's not Maura? Now, again, for all of those coincidence theorists out there, they're cognitive dissonant. They are bereft of logic and reason. These are the ones I'm addressing for the point I'm about to make right now. I'm not saying that Maura Murray was not the driver. Because how would I know? I wasn't there. She may have been the driver. I'm not denying the possibility that I'm not narrative steering saying she wasn't the driver. Or saying that she was the driver. I'm not doing any narrative steering of any kind. I'm not pretending I know what the truth is or isn't. I'm not pretending an assumption is a fact or a fact is an assumption. I'm not doing any of those things. This is an objective logical assessment of the narrative put forward. So, Butch Atwood is the sole individual claiming that and of course, his testimony is a little all over the place. And then, of course, Healy said that he felt Butch Atwood was intimidated by someone. Butch Atwood's actions to some also seem shady. But either way, let's say, even if he was completely honest, even if he thought it was her, does that establish as fact, as irrefutable truth, that it actually was her? If you see someone who you think is someone who they're not, and you're not lying, does that establish as irrefutable fact that that is indeed that person? Obviously not. It is kind of sad, and it just points to how infiltrated this community is. Or they're just, for whatever reason, illogical people are drawn more to the Maura Murray case than other cases, if it's not a case of infiltration. Again, I'm not pretending to know with 100% certainty if that's true. It just seems to be true, given the way all these individuals have so many multiple accounts, the actual way the narrative steering is done. Because you could narrative steer in a more logical way without being so obvious. So, just saying. But these are very, very basic definitions. And if one's Dunning-Kruger is not so severe, get your ego in check and just have these definitions on the side when you discuss the case, so you don't have to pretend. So in other cases, we have real evidence that a missing person was where they said they were. In this case, again, even the few frames released from the ATM video, which may or may not be doctored, which may or may not have the accurate date, again, not necessarily through some kind of conspiracy. How often do ATM videos have the correct date back in 2004? In talking to several different security video experts who've installed and reviewed these systems, not very accurate. Now, again, that doesn't mean I'm not saying that it's not really the ATM video. It could be. But I'm not going to take it on blind faith as gospel truth that humans are so perfect that they would never be corrupt or mistaken in any way and everything runs perfectly at all times, that's definitely 100% the last known sighting of Maura Murray. It may or may not be. And then, of course, the liquor store footage, which has never been released. What's the harm in releasing it now? It's weird. So you could make arguments for police or investigators. They're making a case, they're withholding certain evidence for certain reasons. Is there something on there that if someone harmed Maura Murray, only they would know? And that's in the liquor store video, but not in the ATM video. But at a certain point, whatever the police or investigators are doing, it has not worked because the case is still unsolved. So at which point is it time to switch up the strategy? I don't claim to have the answers. I'm just observing this from the sidelines. Okay. So Butch Atwood's testimony, regardless of whether it was accurate or not, regardless of whether he was intimidated or not, although certain investigators felt that he was, and he was being dishonest, and he does have a failed polygraph. So these are all interesting things to think about when trying to determine whether or not Maura Murray was the driver of the vehicle. And just some people think even questioning this is unnecessary. And these narrative steers, of course, they're so illogical they don't realize creating a house of cards on assumptions, how is that going to get you to the truth if the base layer isn't based in fact? And again, we went over the definitions of what a fact is. I'll say it again. A thing that is known or proved to be true. Now let's look at the word "prove" because again, just the judging from a lot of the comments from the steerers are just simply illogical commenters that are just having so much trouble understanding what I'm saying. Prove, to demonstrate the truth or existence of something. The truth. Let's go over truth, because maybe that's the problem. The quality or state of being true. That which is true or in accordance with fact or reality. Now, do a lot of Maura Murray commenters and personalities in this case, do they have trouble with reality? Let's look at the word reality. The world or the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or notional idea of them. Okay, as they actually exist. So do we know what actually existed at the weathered barn corner? Was that Maura Murray that made it there with the Saturn? And even if she was in the vehicle, was she really the driver? Because we have a cracked window. Was there a smoker? Let's look at the accounts of those in the area, in the neighborhood. And let's go as far back as we can. Closer to the time of the accident, the alleged accident scene. So keep in mind Faith Westman saw a man smoking a cigarette. So a man smoking a cigarette. The coincidence theorists want to sweep that under the rug, never address it ever again. Now, was Faith Westman mistaken? Sure, but it's weird how the narrative steerers engage in these cherry-picking logical fallacies where Faith Westman could have been mistaken. But Butch Atwood, never. No, he's an infallible god. It's just really, really bizarre. But let's look at this Westman interview. This is dated January 8th, 2006. This is a New Hampshire League of Investigators investigator who interviewed the Westmans. This is the write-up here. Interview of Tim and Faith Westman, owners of the Weathered Barn, who live across from the accident site. I went to North Haverhille on Route 112 to view the Maura Murray accident scene. While there, I parked across the street from the Westman residence and saw that they were home in the kitchen and decided to interview them about what they had seen and done on February 9th, 2004. Angela Patrone Nason. I spoke to the Westmans in their kitchen after they invited us inside. They were interviewed together while we stood in their kitchen. During this time, I was able to get a direct view of what they would have seen that night. They had a very clear view of the accident scene. There is also a street light outside their house on the corner, lighting up that area fairly well. Is that well enough to identify the difference between a man and a woman and whether or not someone was smoking a cigarette? The Westmans told us that they were the first to see the accident scene. They heard the collision and watched out their window the entire time. As an aside, they said that the tree the ribbon is on the wrong tree that was hit in the accident, and it was actually closer to the corner. I won't be getting into the issues with whether or not the Saturn hit a tree. I've gone over that many times. Neither of them went out to the scene when it happened, but Tim Westman said that he went out later after all the fire department people and police were there and saw the car close up. He said that there wasn't much snow on the snowbanks and the car could be walked around without trouble. The car looked like it was parked on the roadway and didn't readily look like it had crashed. So let me say that again. He said that there wasn't much snow on the snowbanks and that the car could be walked around without trouble. So let's go over Butch's account real quick. Butch, on describing Maura's appearance, specifically says hair being down and wearing a dark colored jacket. All right, so obviously that doesn't really tell us anything either way, but in the ATM footage, Maura's wearing a white jacket and her hair's in a bun. So obviously she could have switched jackets, she could have switched up the way she wore her hair, all that's possible. But does this prove with 100% certainty that Butch saw Maura? Or does it cast doubt? These irregularities. Coincidence theorists love to just write everything off as coincidence and sweep all anomalies under the rug. The other point to note, and of course this is the Whitman-Hanson Express article, July 12th, 2007. So this references, of course, earlier articles, but here's what the article states about Atwood's encounter with Maura Murray. Atwood stopped by the scene of the accident, saw a young woman alone in the car who he later identified as Maura Murray. Her dark hair was hanging down, not in its customary bun though, although Atwood said he could clearly see her face. She was shook up but not injured, he reported to police. I saw no blood, she was cold and she was shivering, Atwood told the Caledonian Record. Maura struggled to get out of her Saturn because the car door was hitting against a snowbank, Atwood recalled. There was as much as 2.5 feet of snow on the ground in the area. Atwood stepped out of his bus and asked Maura if she wanted him to call the police. Okay, Maura told him not to bother, saying that she had already called AAA. Okay, the problem is, he's claiming that Maura's driver's side door was up against the snowbank 2.5 feet high. Atwood said he remained on the driver's side of her car 15 to 20 feet away and stayed there during their entire conversation. All right, so a couple points there. Let's go back to this interview, New Hampshire League of Investigators. I will reiterate this point again. Tim Westman said he went out later after the fire department people and police were there. So he's out there with the police and fire department, and he saw the car close up. He said there wasn't much snow on the snowbanks. Now, what is much? Is 2.5 feet a lot? I don't know. And that the car could be walked around without trouble. Interesting. The car looked like it was parked on the roadway and didn't readily look like it had crashed. So what are the options here? Regardless of whether or not Maura Murray was the driver, the passenger, or even there in the first place, even if it wasn't there, someone else was dumping the Saturn, that tells us the car was either moved, because Marat also saw the brake lights and the car backing up or whatnot, and then there were different people who saw the vehicle in different positions. So it seems like the vehicle, either all these people are mistaken or lying, or a combination of both, depending on which witness is claiming the Saturn is in which position at which time, or the vehicle was simply moved around, in which case we don't really know what happened because then it was drivable. So, all right, let's continue with this article here. Mrs. Westman said she called 911 right away and had no trouble getting through. Either 911 or the police department hung up with them after getting their information. I didn't ask which entity she talked to. Both the Westmans said they saw whoever had been in the car when it crashed get in and out of the car several times. All right, let me read that again. Both the Westmans said that they saw whoever had been in the car when it crashed get in and out of the car several times. They made sure to say that they could not recognize it as Maura Murray because it was too dark, but they could see the form of someone moving around. I will say that again. They made sure to say that they could not recognize it as Maura Murray. So, of course, then we have Faith Westman thought it was a man smoking a cigarette. So, again, there's so many online personalities in this case who claim the Westmans not only saw a female, but Maura Murray. So that's quite bizarre. Let's stick to the facts here. The fact is that according to this interview, they stated they could not recognize it as Maura Murray. All right. They've said they saw the interior light go on and off several times and heard the doors shut as if someone kept getting in and out of the car. They also said they saw the person open the trunk and close it as well during this time. They never saw anyone else around that car besides that one person, and never saw any other vehicle stop prior to police arrival other than a school bus. The Westman said that 4 to 5 minutes after the car crashed, they saw a school bus come from around the corner and stop in the road next to the car. They didn't see who was driving, but heard later that it was Butch Atwood. They said that his wife also drives the bus and also is large like he is, so it very well could have been her for all they knew. They indicated they understood his wife did not have his last name but went by Reynolds. The Westmans said that the school bus was between them and Maura and that she had gotten out of the car but she did not get on the bus. It seemed that the bus driver talked to her for no more than 2 minutes, and the driver never got out of the bus or out of the seat for that matter. The driver drove off and the car's driver went back to the car. When I asked the Westmans about the timeline between that point and when the police arrived, they said that it took about 15 minutes for the police to arrive after the bus left. They felt sure that it could have been that long, but no shorter than 10 minutes. During this time, they saw someone smoking a cigarette from inside the car from the front passenger side seat. Tim Westman said that he had told Fred Murray about that, but he insisted his daughter did not smoke, so it must have been the light from her cell phone, he said. This is phrased strangely, because Tim Westman said that he had told Fred Murray about that, but he insisted his daughter did not smoke. So that he is referencing Fred Murray. So it must have been the light from her cell phone, he said. Is that Tim Westman that made that deduction? Or did Fred Murray tell them it must have been the light from her cell phone? So here's a quick post about supposedly an expert smoker and someone who spends a lot of time around smokers. This was from the Maura Murray controlled subreddit a few years ago. As someone who has spent a lot of time around smokers, cigarettes, and cell phones, I can say this much. A lit cigarette looks absolutely nothing like the red charging light on a cell phone. And there's no reason to think Maura would have looked like a man, especially if her hair was down. I'm not sure what Faith Westman saw or what she thought she saw or whatever. I'm not sure it's super relevant. Eyewitnesses tend to not be super reliable, observant, or good at describing what they saw. Except for Butch Atwood, right? Butch Atwood's just an infallible god when it comes to identifying Maura. But everybody else has to be dismissed. Okay, but she saw a girl on a cell phone which she confused for a man smoking a cigarette thing never really flew with me. So we do have a couple problems here. So was Fred Murray the one who put the kibosh on the cigarette smoking figure, man-like figure? So for whatever reason, he seemed to really believe Maura was at the Saturn. Did he just assume that without question? He insisted his daughter did not smoke. Okay, so even if she did smoke occasionally, like some people smoke when they're stressed out, would he know about it? I don't know. I'm just saying, someone with their hair down, a female figure, it's not like she wasn't some, obviously in her high school photos, she was a lot thinner, actively running. In the photos, the closest to her disappearance, I mean, she had a more average female figure. It really seems difficult for someone to not only mistake her for a man, but also mistakes a cigarette with smoke for a cigarette. And again, this was only a few minutes. I don't know. It's really bizarre. And they're moving in and out of the car many times. So if they're charging their phone, why would they also be moving in and out of the car so many times, opening and closing the trunk? It's just, the whole thing doesn't make a lot of sense, no matter, I mean, I don't know if you can come up with a theory that accounts for all these variables. It's very, very bizarre. So the Westman said that the light inside the car and trunk kept going on and off. So not only are they going in and out of the car, opening and closing doors, but also opening and closing the trunk multiple times? I mean, this is bizarre. And finally, there were no lights on at all. No more than 2 minutes after that point, the police cruiser arrived. Shortly thereafter, a police officer knocked on their door asking if anyone from the car accident had come to their residence, and they said no. Or did they say, "Where's the girl?" Did Cecil Smith say, "Where's the girl"? How did he know it was a girl? Okay, let's not go into that. But is it possible the driver of the Saturn did not get picked up right there, particularly if the Westmans were watching the whole time? Obviously, it's unclear. I think Tim said before that he possibly did not watch the whole time, but Faith did. So, is it possible the driver of the vehicle during that so there were lights on and off for minutes. So they're saying this was between 10 and there was 10 and 15 minutes. So let's say it could be no shorter than 10 minutes. So within 10 minutes, the lights are going on and off, the trunk lights going on and off. The person is entering and exiting the vehicle multiple times in the course of it's actually 8 minutes because it was 10 minutes to police arrival. So that's 8 minutes of this individual smoking, moving inside and outside of the vehicle, and opening and closing the trunk. And there was approximately 2 minutes from no lights, no more than 2 minutes. So the person left the vehicle, and then there was about 2 minutes before the police cruiser arrived. So in that 2 minutes, where did that person go? Did they get picked up elsewhere? Okay, and we don't know what the deal is, which vehicle. I'm not going to go into 001. I've gone over that in the previous episodes. If you haven't checked those out, make sure you check those out. So both Tim and Faith Westman say they are positive that nobody walked by their house back towards Route 10. They said that they could see clearly out in front of their house and would have seen her go by. Plus, the officer came from that way and didn't see her. I was there when it turned dark, and the light is fairly bright and the house is close to the road. They felt that she must have walked the other way. The Westman said that EMS and fire showed up and that for about an hour they all walked around looking throughout the area. When they were done, there were footprints all over the place and any follow-up would have been difficult. I asked the Westmans about the Atwood family. They said they didn't know them very well. They kept to themselves and had no children, they said. They weren't openly neighborly, but thought that Mr. Murat, who lived across the road from them, was. All right. So that is this account from the New Hampshire League of Investigators, January 8th, 2006. Now let's move to the Whitewash account, October 7th, 2008. And this was from an interview from January 7th. Okay, so this is, around 2 years later. So the one I just read was closer to 2004. So I've gone over the Whitewash account, but I'll do it again. The car accident that happened on February 9th, 2004, along the Wild Amanusak River changed not only Maura Murray's life, but that of her family, friends, and definitely the entire community along Route 112 in Woodsville. The mystery of what happened to Murray, 21, a University of Massachusetts nursing student who disappeared that night, is still plaguing everyone. Too many questions still swirl around what happened that tragic night. Area residents have been barraged for 3 years with police, private investigators, reporters, the Murray family, friends, and supporters all searching, questioning, and frustrated. The residents have been caught up in an investigation just because it happened in their neighborhood. Every turn in the case has led to another question. Despite thousands of hours spent by law enforcement, fire and rescue, family and friends, and a whole host of forum members on her website, MauraMurrayMissing.com, everyone has the same two questions. Where is Maura, and what happened to her? Helena Murray, spokesperson for the Maura Murray website, states that the website was started to generate tips for searching for Maura. Murray states many people assume law enforcement or the family knows all there is, when in fact they do not. Murray hopes that the information discussed on the website may jog someone's memory. Information discussed vary from the fact that Maura's favorite supermarket was indeed Shaw's. Maura believed in brushing even after snacks. Murray took a leave of absence from her own career to assist the family with the website and to serve as media resource for many. Since stepping into the role, Murray has served the family in keeping the search for Maura going forward. There has been much focus on what was not done and little on what was done by those who attempted to assist Miss Murray that evening. Across from the weathered barn on Route 112 is the Tim and Faith Westman home. The Westmans have been caught up in the flurry of activity that stemmed from that February 9th when a young woman vanished. Only 3 people may have been the last to see Maura Murray. Faith Westman may be of the 3 if it is Murray they all saw that night. Interesting phrasing there, is it not? All right. That night, the Westmans share. Faith and Tim Westman were working in their home office in front of their home, which faces Route 112. We heard a thump. Faith Westman states, and she went to her kitchen window and saw a car parallel parked across the road with no lights on and called 911. Faith Westman states she believed she was one of the 3 911 calls received about this accident. Her call is received by Grafton County Dispatch approximately at 7:29 p.m. While on the phone with dispatch, Faith witnesses a school bus driven by one of her 2 neighbors that drove for first student busing. Westman was unable to tell which of the Atwoods were driving that night. Westman saw the school bus approach the car within minutes to her phoning 911. Westman claims the bus driver opened the door and spoke to a driver who was out of the car. The school bus driver remained on the bus, and Faith states the conversation seemed to be 1 to 2 minutes in length. Westman notes that the car driver activated the 4-way hazard lights. She saw the school bus leave, and Westman noted the driver was at the trunk of the car, then returned to the vehicle inside, and Westman saw the interior lights flashed on and off. Westman recalls seeing a red dot moving around the front of the car. So now this is years later, so did they adjust their recollection to match what Fred Murray said, that she didn't smoke, so it must have been the Charger? Because originally it was a man smoking a cigarette. Now it's phrased as seeing a red dot because Faith Westman and Tim Westman, they were told that couldn't be true because Maura smoked a cigarette. And did this account morph into the red dot, possibly the car charger, the cell phone charger? So that's why it's always important to go back to the accounts closest to the time of the accident for the most accuracy. All right, let's continue here. It was at this point that Faith assumed the driver was fine and returned to her own business. She believes still on the phone with 911 as nothing appeared to be out of the normal, and within minutes, Westman states they heard a car pull up, and Faith checked out the window and states she sees a Haverhill Police Department cruiser and ends the call with 911. Yeah, it would be helpful if she stated whether it was a sedan or an SUV cruiser. Faith Westman resumed her computer work with her husband. Since the Westmans have lived in their home some 35 years, such an occurrence is not much out of the norm, so a compelling need to continue watching didn't seem to occur to either her or her husband, Tim Westman. Now, here's another point. I'm going to deviate for the article for a second. I mentioned this before. A young woman getting into an accident of which it's kind of unclear what they thought, and regardless of what they really thought, they might have not stated. Would they be more or less likely to go out in the road and assist if it's a young woman versus a man, especially a taller man, possibly smoking a cigarette? Would they be as worried about an adult male smoking a cigarette versus a possible young woman alone who might have been injured in the accident? Just questions to ponder. So when Sergeant Cecil Smith showed up at the door asking about the vehicle's driver, Faith Westman was shocked. Faith remembers going to the kitchen window and checking the abandoned vehicle in disbelief for herself. Faith Westman told Sergeant Smith that they had seen one of the Atwoods stop to check if the driver was okay. The Westmans stated they could not tell whether the driver was male or female. Westman informed Smith that they saw the driver turn the 4-ways on and was moving about the interior of the car. That was their first initial interview about the incident. That's pretty weird. So is this some kind of revisionist history going on? Because let's go to the Grafton County log. At 1927, Faith Westman called to advise of a vehicle in the ditch right on the sharp turn after the weathered barn. Can see a man in vehicle smoking a cigarette. All right, so now immediately we have some inconsistencies here, because the revisionist, so years later, Faith is stating that she couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. But on the actual call, she stated that she could see a man in the vehicle smoking a cigarette, and the vehicle was in a ditch. Now, Tim Westman, upon the earlier New Hampshire League of Investigators interview, he's stating that the vehicle's parked on the road and not up against the ditch, could clearly be walked around. How do we make heads or tails of these things? This is very, very bizarre. In the original, also from this FOIA document that Aaron Larkin was able to get, states, Grafton County Dispatcher Marsh, can I help you? Faith Westman states, yes, we apparently have a car has gone off the road here outside our home. Is anybody hurt? I have not gone out to investigate. Okay, so they call, they don't know if anybody's hurt or not. Would they be more likely to go out to investigate if it was a female, a lone female, as opposed to a possibly scary-looking man? I don't know. And the man smoking the cigarette is not mentioned in the redacted transcript. So is this new transcript doctored? Because in the original Grafton County Sheriff's log, it is mentioned. Now, what's more accurate? Documents provided through FOIA many years later, after we have all this shadiness involved in the case, or something closer to the time of the incident? Okay, you know what else is interesting? Guy Parody himself, the man, the myth, the legend, regardless of how people feel about him and his Rick Forcier theories, he stated this. Both of the Westmans said that a couple minutes after Atwood and the bus left, they saw some activity outside the car and believed it was Maura walking around her vehicle. Tim Westman said he could see a small light near Maura's face and thought she was smoking a cigarette. He later learned that Maura did not smoke and that the light he saw was probably a light from her cell phone. Very interesting that Guy Parody completely goes with the revisionist, they saw Maura, when they clearly state they didn't. So how good of an investigator is Guy Parody? It's very interesting, but it's also interesting that Tim Westman, apparently Faith said she saw a man smoking a cigarette. Now Tim Westman said he could see a small light near Maura's face and thought she was smoking a cigarette. So did Guy Parody paraphrase? Did Tim Westman say he saw the man, or whoever it was, he saw their face lit up by a cigarette? Then when he was informed Maura didn't smoke, then he said, oh, well, I guess it wasn't a cigarette. Did he allow that information to change his recollection? So that's all very, very interesting, is it not? So in the Whitewash interview, years later, the Westmans are stating they could not tell whether the driver was male or female. Obviously, the original Grafton log, it says that that Faith said there was a man smoking a cigarette. All right, let's continue here in this Whitewash interview. Westman informed Smith they saw the driver turn the four-ways on and was moving about the interior of the car. That was their first initial interview about the incident. After a period of time, Sergeant Smith returns to check their weathered barn and parking lot. Tim Westman assisted Smith. Tim Westman states that on scene, fire personnel are searching Old Peters Road. Further inspection occurred of the gaming trail that runs along the Westman backfields that runs the length of their property to their neighbors, the Atwoods property. Tim reported that he remembers no footprints were found other than deer tracks along the gaming trail. Tim Westman recalls that the road that night was dry as it would be on a sunny day. Tim Westman, quote, I'm as baffled today by the fact that the driver indeed cleared the corner, end quote, and noted that Murray's vehicle was not at all the usual resting place of most vehicles that do not make the sharp corner of the road. So again, we have all of these inconsistencies from the norm. I mean, everything from Atwood not even parking his bus the way he always parks it. It just seems that on this particular night, nothing was normal. And yet the coincidence theorists brush it all under the rug. Very strange. Tim Westman recalls the car was several feet up the road from the corner and not resting at the brightly ribbon-covered tree. He remembers the vehicle was at a set of 3 trees, which leads him to believe the driver was indeed going too fast for the corner and was over the yellow line, correcting themselves perhaps too much. The thump they heard was indeed that of something striking the trees. Once again, when we go to the earlier interview, he said that the vehicle was parked on the road and he could clearly walk around it. All right, back to this one. The vehicle was completely locked when Sergeant Smith found it. It remained locked even after a local towing company impounded it. Now, we know that's not true because there were witnesses that saw the door open, etc., etc. Okay, anyway, back to this article. A warrant was secured and the car was inspected by law enforcement authorities. The vehicle was released to its rightful owner, Fred Murray. Both Fred and Billy went through the car that week. Eventually, the car was turned over to law enforcement officials when the case turned from a missing persons to an investigation. I mean, that's one narrative. Apparently, as soon as John Smith wanted the vehicle, all of a sudden law enforcement needed it back. Anyway, okay, the Woodsville Fire Department was holding its monthly officers meeting on February 9th, 2004, which started at 7 p.m. that evening. What a coincidence! That's the time of the earlier accident. Okay, for Grafton County, it is standard procedure to tow a fire department to the scene of a motor vehicle accident to check for leakage. Fire personnel involved state they received a bolo that reached some 63 agencies. On the way to the scene by Grafton County Dispatch, ordered by Sergeant Smith for a female, 5 foot 7 inches, who had left the scene of the accident they were responding to. Other eyewitnesses. There are statements confirming that New Hampshire State Police did stop one resident walking from the Stagecoach store in the area of Bunga Road, along with returning security personnel who had been cleared from the scene. It was the same local resident also reported to authorities that she had seen a red truck with what she believed to be Massachusetts license plates go by her when she was walking and had slowed down enough to make her uneasy. She then saw the same red truck sitting in the parking lot at the Stagecoach store. When she reached the store lot, the red truck left. Another Bradley Hill resident returning from a school board meeting stated that they were stopped prior to the weathered barn by responding personnel still on scene who informed them there was a missing driver and asked to search their property, which borders Route 112 and Bradley Hill, when they arrived home. Most residents can produce numerous business cards from law enforcement officials to private investigators and the media who over the past 3 years have all revisited all the residents asking questions, looking for leads with no avail as another year passes, with all asking the same 2 questions. Where is Maura and what happened to Maura Murray on February 9th, 2004? Regardless of the theory, the same 2 questions still remain. So that's all very, very interesting, is it not? Do we have irrefutable proof that Maura Murray was the driver? Do the words of humans constitute irrefutable proof? Now, obviously, 2 different humans, unrelated to each other, corroborating and identifying Maura would be stronger evidence than 1. I think everybody could agree on that. Do we have that here? No, we do not. Is Maura Murray being the driver of the Saturn anything more than an assumption at this point with the information available? I will leave the listeners to answer that one at this time. Leave your questions, comments, theories, rebuttals, debunking, if any, about Maura Murray being the driver of the Saturn, because this is all very, very curious. Some people theorize she never left Massachusetts. Others yet theorize that she did indeed make it in the Saturn to New Hampshire, but was part of an earlier accident closer to 7 p.m. And that from that point on, it was not Maura Murray who drove the Saturn to its final resting place in North Haverhille just beyond the weathered barn corner. Many theories abound, much more to explore. I'll be heading back to UMass for the next episode. Plenty more to discuss there. A lot of people don't want that avenue investigated, but the truth is not afraid of investigation. So if indeed there was something to UMass and the endless anomalies that are going on at UMass, this theory, it's just everything about the case could be turned on its head. And if everybody was operating with assumptions, why are certain cold cases unsolved? Is it because certain base layers of assumptions taken as facts and investigated from that point on, is that why a case is unsolved? Does going back to the beginning, is that a good idea? There's an old saying, trust but verify. I would modify it to this: distrust and verify. Why would you trust anything on faith? Again, that doesn't mean humans are complicit in any kind of conspiracy. It's just humans are fallible. It's just that simple. It's that simple. And if you're doing an honest, logical, objective investigation, pretending assumptions are facts or facts are assumptions, that's not the way to do a proper investigation or even any kind of proper theorizing. So, much more to come on the Mindshock podcast. If you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. If you like the podcast, hit the like button, share it across social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Reddit, Patreon, and Facebook. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.